specific purpose. Under Regulation 2 of the Constitution, bracket, use of official languages regulations, the following is stated. English shall be the sole language for the transaction of business of the courts, and for and in connection with the drafting of a written law, save as provided in Regulation 3. Further, we wish to point out Section 10 of the Commission of Inquiry Act 1962, which is the act that this commission is presently using. That act empowers the commissioner to regulate the conduct and management of the proceedings before them. And Section 12 of the same act, bracket 2, provides that, and I quote, where the commissioners consider it desirable for the purpose of avoiding expenses or delay or for any other special reason, they may receive evidence by affidavit or administer interrogatories and require the person to whom the interrogatories are administered to make a full and true reply of such interrogatories. Moreover, in terms of Section 4.1 of our terms and reference, those that we published in the Gazette in December of last year, we have the power to see, receive evidence by affidavit or administer interrogatories where the commissioner considers it desirable for the purpose of avoiding expense or delay or for any other special reason. And D, do all such other things as are necessary for the proper fulfillment of its mandate, including the power to include the production of any relevant documents or information. 4.3 states, the proceedings of the Commission shall be held in public, save for where the Commission, for reasons of national security, the protection of witnesses, or the administration of justice, determines that certain proceedings should be held in camera. Now, here are some reasons why we have exercised our power to conduct the proceedings in English. It is the language of the courts. Our transcriptions services are in English. We utilize AI to improve the efficiency of transcribing. When we assess the witness list a while back, we have compiled our list since December of last year, we came to the conclusion that all our witnesses are competent in English, including the VP and the President. The cost of interpretation services was not necessary, and therefore we did not ask for a budget for it. We do not have that budget. We gave Mr. Afif the choice to testify in English, adjourn, or to undertake an interrogatory. He elected not to testify today. I will take a decision regarding how we proceed in terms of the law I have outlined. And I shall take that decision based on the expediency of the Commission. We have to report on the 8th of June, and that date is approaching. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for your understanding. Mr. Savi, thank you for coming.
Thank you, good morning.
Would you mind speaking in English?
Indeed, I'll speak in English, madam.
Thank you. Are you Christian?
I am Catholic, yes, Christian.
Would you like to take the oath?
Of course.
Would you raise your right hand and repeat after me? I swear that the evidence I shall give before this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. For the record, could you state your name, your address, and your profession?
My name is Michel Glenisavi. I reside at Lugnol, and I am an engineer by profession.
Thank you. You are the son of Mr. Glenisavi.
That's correct.
And he served as chief executive of the Islands Development Company for over 43 years, I believe?
Since before I was born, yes.
Exactly, until late 2024.
I believe 2020, yes, definitely 2024, yes, correct.
And during that entire time, a state-owned entity that we know as IDC was responsible for managing the outer islands. Would I be correct?
Well, yes,
including
IDC,
Assomption.
Including Assumption, yes.
Yeah. And IDC was also the sublessor of, the lessor of all these islands from the government.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
I mean, madam, sorry, if I
Yeah,
can just say,
yeah.
I'm not privy to IDC's leases.
No, only as far as you're concerned.
Yes,
for the job
as
that
far as
you
I
did.
know,
Yeah.
colloquially, yes.
Yeah. So Atom Engineering, of which you are the director,
Yes.
okay, was awarded a civil engineering subcontract for the Assomption Runway extension.
An engineering contract, not subcontract.
It was a contract itself.
It was a contract itself.
And the ultimate principle of that contract, was it UCC?
No, it was IDCC.
IDCC. I just wanted to check that with you.
Mm-hmm.
Which is part of the Qatari Assets Group, is it?
It's not Assets. It is an independent company from Assets.
Could you give us the name of the company?
IDCC, the full
Yeah.
name?
No. You
No.
said IDCC is also a subsidiary.
No. There you have IDCC as one entity, and then you have UCC as an entity, and you have Assets as an entity.
Who is the parent company?
Power International Holdings.
Power International.
Yes.
So on the 2nd of October, Atom Engineering submitted a planning application to the Seychelles Planning Authority for the widening and the lengthening of the Assomption airstrip.
Can I just check, because I actually have that documentation?
Please.
We submitted it, a bit later than the 2nd of October, because we received a notification of receipt of proposed application on the 19th of October.
Okay, well, let's back off. Let's back up a bit so we can get context to it.
Sure.
You can leave the documentation open.
Yeah.
When did you first know of the project?
I knew of the project when there was news on the social media and in the nation. There was expressions of interest for development of projects for two islands, Assumption being one, and I think the other one was Kuwaiti.
Yeah.
This was many years ago, so I'm. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just to give you context and just for you to be able to focus on the dates, the expression of interest was around the first week of June.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
Of 20.
23.
Sorry.
2023. All this is in 2023.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes. Okay.
So when were you approached then?
I was approached in 2023, certainly, by a representative from the Qatari organization. I'm just using the term organization because it's so vast and there's so many different entities. So I was approached, it was a telephone call that I received from one of their team members who called me and said that they wanted to talk to me if I could set up a meeting at a convenient time, because there would be some investigations, some ground investigations that would need to be done, because the ground over there is
Yeah.
quite particular. And
Was that before June 2023 or after?
Madam, I don't remember if it was before or
Would
after
you have
June.
documentation that
No,
can help you?
I mean, what I can do is after the fact, I'll try and look in my phone records because I'm sure it would be somewhere in there. But I will try my best to give that to you after. But I can't tell you the specific date of a phone call.
Do you know who contacted you?
Yes, it was Mr. Salihi, who is the principal of IDCC.
Okay. Do you know how he got your name?
No, I was made to understand that they contacted people locally to look at this ground investigation service, and there's very few people that do that in Seychelles. Okay, there's two that I know of. There's myself, and then there's another engineer, but who works in solo. Now, my understanding, just to skip forward a little bit, my understanding was that they came to us because they understood that we actually an organization. It's not just a one-man band. We have 8 engineers here. And so they wanted to deal with us for that ground investigation only, which was a 3-week assignment.
What did you do during that time?
Okay, so the assignment was basically to gain insights into the nature of the ground over there, because it was understood that the ground was quite was different from other islands, and certainly Mahe. So we were to establish the facts on how to be able to safely build on that ground, and to understand the nature of that ground. So at some point, again, I can't remember the exact dates, but at some point I went there on an IDC flight. It wasn't a dedicated flight. There were other people there, obviously, and I went to see the ground, and immediately I understood that, okay, first of all, this is karst ground. We know that.
You had not been to Assomption before?
I had, but I was maybe 10 years old. So for practical intents and purposes, no. At 10 years old, and 2023, I'm now 40, so it didn't mean anything at the time. So for practical intents and purposes, you can say that I didn't know anything about the ground there. Okay. So I went, and I understood immediately what the type of ground was. It's a karst limestone. It suffers from dissolution from rainfall, etc., etc. And at that point, I was able to then form an idea of what a ground investigation would be constituted of in terms of the different tasks. So at that point, I realized that we would need my team as people that are competent in geotechnical engineering, and we would need a geologist to help us identify the various types of limestone, and and its parameters, and we would need a geophysicist to help us with geophysical techniques to be able to detect what's going on underground, because we realize that there's a lot of these caves which are actually the old guano holes where the guano has been extracted, and therefore the hole is left behind, and it's a cave in colloquial parlance. So and then obviously we would have to map out certain zones, and in fact I've noticed that you've got some of our maps you've been projecting on your screen. So we had to map that out as well. So we brought our surveyor as well. And off we went for 3 weeks. We lived on the island. Myself, Mr. Mike Shaw, who was our geologist, who we still work with him today. There was Mr. Bjorn, I forget his last, it's a Dutch last name. He was a geophysicist who came to do the ground penetrating radar and so on, and interpret the results. And he also did some electro-resistance tomography, which is also a geophysical technique. We and Mr. Vanesh Mohit, who was our surveyor. Okay, so the team mapped the area, the relevant areas, obviously not the entire island, but just the relevant strips where we were asked to. We identified insights into, the geologists explained to us how these sorts of structures, these geological structures form, which then gave us insights into how they would behave from an engineering point of view, which then allowed us to develop a foundation solution, which would then be workable for what was to be applied, well, for any system that would potentially be applied on the island. And we handed over a report, and our job was done.
Was there any hydrographs carried out?
Hydrographs?
Yes, hydro checks.
You mean hydrological studies? No, because, well, yes and no, if I can clarify. We did not bring a hydrologist in. The reason for that is because the island in itself receives very little rainfall, as I'm sure you know. It receives only about 400 millimeters of rain per annum, compared to Mahe, which gets 2,000. Okay, so that's not to say that the rainfall isn't important, quite the contrary. However, due to the volume of water which falls, it would directly drain into the caves and so on. So it was not found absolutely necessary at that point to follow the hydrology as you would, for example, in a watershed at Assomption, let's say.
No, my question also stems from the fact that a lot of these underground caves, some of them not necessarily from guano, but because of the karst limestone and the karst physiognomy, that the tides come in and out from under the karst.
Yes.
That's what I'm asking you about.
Yes. So if I can just enlighten you towards that, because yes, this was picked up by the geologists, and it was very well explained in our report as to why those caves appear to do that.
Okay.
There's actually two kinds of limestones on the island. Okay. There's a limestone which is formed from dead reefs. Okay. So these reefs essentially at some point were obviously submerged. Okay. So you had a reef that grew, and those reefs, as they grow like trees, if you will. Okay. Now, as the trunks grow, they intertwine, similar to, for example, how a lafourche, a banyan tree would be. I don't know if you've seen the one on Anonym, where you have all the trunks and it's like going through caves. So this is how you form that cave. So eventually, as our geologists explained to us, your sea level comes down at some geological period in time, and you start getting waves, which then bring in certain microorganisms who are made of calcium-based shells. And this then, and they get caught in there and they die, and it forms something called lime mud, which eventually gets baked by the sun, which then gives you a more smooth and what we call platin limestone. Okay, so the typical profile of the sort of limestones through the island, if you take a cross section from the shoreline towards the center of the island, is that you would have this cavernous sort of limestone, and then you would have more like a cake type of limestone, for in layman's terms. And so where we see the caves, where we see the tide is coming in and out, the tide is coming in and out because it's not actually a tunnel, if you will. It's basically just coming in between the trunks of these old corals, which is now lithified into limestone. So if that helps to answer your question. So yes, our geologists picked up on why this tide is seen to be coming in and out.
What you have said is extremely interesting for us, because we wanted to know whether all this had been done before the whole project started off. Of course. So I wanted to ask you, try give me a ballpark figure of when this happened, before planning, before the list, after the runway, at which part?
No, it was definitely before the runway. Definitely before the runway. It was before planning, and it was before planning. It was before the runway. I can get you exact dates, madam, because obviously we have the documentation, and I'm happy to hand it over to you. But it was definitely before the runway, and it was definitely before planning. Okay.
At any stage at that point there, were there any weight-bearing exercise carried out on the karst?
Yes, of course. What we did was we understood that you see, it wasn't just a question of how strong is the rock, because the rock can be very strong, but if it's fractured, then it's a risk. And how strong is a fractured rock? No one can confidently and professionally answer that question. So one of our findings was like, let's try and stay away from fractured rock, and we identified ways to identify what is fractured rock. For example, you see that it tends to be jagged, and you see it looks like a broken mirror at surface. Okay, so we said stay away from broken mirrors when you see that on the ground. Stay closer to areas where you have the cake-like limestone. Okay, because that would be more sound to found on.
But at that stage, Mr. Savvy, you had gone precisely just for the runway, not for the hotel development.
No, madam. It was for because we did the whole western.
So at that stage, when you went, it was to look at the whole development, including the runway.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And sorry. When you say the runway, we weren't asked to design a runway yet.
No. Okay. But you knew that there was a proposal to extend and widen the runway.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes,
so when you went, you had to assess that, but you also had to assess the rest of the island for the development. Am I correct?
The ground. We had to assess the ground where the runway would be extended.
Okay. So then, I see that you submitted the applications to the Seychelles Planning Authority on the 2nd of October 2023.
It was in October 2023.
You may refer to your documents.
Yes. It was in October 2023. We submitted a set of designs
Okay.
for planning approval, and we received.
So you submitted on behalf of whom?
It was submitted on. Well, we were working for the Qataris.
Yes.
Okay, but the submission
Mhm.
was signed off as a developer was signed off because let me just take a step back. When you submit an application to planning, you have to sign as the engineer or the architect, and also the owner has to sign saying, you know, yes, I asked this person to submit this. Now, because this runway belongs to IDC, it was signed off by IDC. However, our agreement and in fact our payments for the work came from IDCC, which is a Qatari organization.
Thank you.
Because the Qatari organization cannot sign for the runway which doesn't belong to them. It was purely for that reason.
Okay. You were granted the airstrip approval on the 17th of November 2023.
Um,
And there were
we
several.
got the planning approval, no, on the 15th of November, madam.
Could you check?
Yes, I have it right here. It's stamped 15th.
Because I was the 17th. But that was
No.
the one that was sent to IDC. So maybe they sent it to IDC 2 days later.
Madam, I couldn't tell you.
You have yours with you?
Of course.
Would you mind if you have a look?
Absolutely.
Not that I'm doubting you. We'll show you ours if you show you yours.
All right. So, okay. So it's American. 11/15/23. This is a stamp approval. 15th November 23. So it's 15th. Yeah. Okay. So there's something very interesting about the document, and we'll talk about it afterwards if you don't mind.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Would you like to take a chair?
May I, please? Thank you.
And what I'm going to then ask you is that it includes several conditions.
Yes.
So you can talk about that.
These conditions.
These
This
conditions.
document, madam, I can tell you it's the first time in my life I see it. If you will indulge me, I will walk you through exactly what we received. I've got screenshots, I've got all the documents here. If you will give me 10 minutes. Okay, so as you said, the approval process started when we submitted the designs for the runway extension and widening. We received a receipt from planning to say we've received your request for an application to be approved, and we got that receipt, that confirmation of receipt on the 19th of October 2023. They then sent the invoice for the official fees for the tune of 5,000 rupees, which is the standard fee, and that was dated 9th of October as well. And I have here a screenshot of all the drawings that we and the supporting documents which we submitted. It's right here. I'll hand it over to you. So that included 4 drawings, a cadastral plan, a declaration form signed by IDC, an engineer certificate signed by myself, layout plans again, a lease. That would be the lease between IDC and government, obviously.
I think we have these, yeah.
Okay. No, this screenshot here.
We have the actual document.
Okay, no, but I'm just showing you what we actually upload, because you see, it's a portal system, it's online. So this is what I'm trying to establish, what we submitted and what we got back. So if you bear with me, you'll see
Yes,
what.
please
we got
take
back.
your time.
Okay. Side plan, ortho photo as well. Okay. So this was the application, and we have a document here from planning saying yes, we received this. Okay, perfect. Now, as of January 2026, no, sorry, before I get to that, we received a planning approval. We received a planning approval on the 15th of November, okay, of 2023. So that's about a month later, give or take a couple of days, okay? So we got our planning approval on the 15th of November. And the planning approval constituted of 6 documents. Okay, there were 4 drawings stamped approved, which you just saw yourself, madam. There were comments from SCAA and there were comments from PUC Electric. There was absolutely no comments from environment.
So you didn't see that document?
That is, actually today is the first time that I'm seeing this document, this specific document. If I may carry on, you'll see how the story moves on. So we get our approvals from SCAA, well, not approvals, sorry, our comments from SCAA. We get some comments from PUC, although we were never supposed to get power from them, but you know, they were diligent. They issued us.
Yeah, we have all this.
Okay, excellent. And here you have the actual stamp drawing. So I've given you a copy of the drawing stamped here, approved. Now here's where it gets, so this was November 2023. So by December 2023, construction started in earnest. By construction started in earnest, I mean concrete started to be mixed, you know, and you know, construction work actually started. Equipment started to be moved to the island, concrete mixers, and so on and so forth. And the work started in December 2023. Okay. So come end of Feb 2024, 3 months later, the runway was practically complete. Obviously, there was, you know, the grass to be planted on the side, a little bit of leveling of sand on the side because you need to have a bit of an overrun.
So you were the engineer, but who was the contractor?
IDC.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes, that was, yeah, it was IDC was the contractor who did the physical work.
You were just doing the engineering work.
Yeah, just a designer, yeah. Okay, so, So then by end of Feb, the runway was practically complete, like I said, save for a few little bits and pieces. Now, fast forward to March of 2024, so the following month after the runway was built. So I have here an article from Today newspaper where it says, a public meeting was held on Saturday, 9th of March to present the anticipated projections of the proposed 5-star hotel project on Assumption Island. Now, I was there at this meeting, okay? Because by that point, the developers had asked us to take on the structural design of the superstructure after having seen our work that we did in the ground investigation. And we can discuss this later because it's another line altogether. Now, so with regards to the airport, so the how do you call it? The public meeting as part of the EIA was held.
The scoping report, scoping meeting.
It's correct. The public scoping meeting was held. I was sitting there in the front. I was not on the panel, obviously, because I'm not an environmental I'm not responsible for the environmental aspect of the job, although obviously we respect the environment. I sat next to one of the representatives of the developer who was there as well. And then their design team, their architects and ICS and so on was there and doing their job as the EIA consultants. Now, someone stood up and said, why is it that, someone from the, you know, the public said, why is it that the EIA here, we're not talking about the runway? Where was the EIA for the runway? And the panelists, I'm paraphrasing here, right, because obviously it was a while ago. The panelists then said, well, we were never asked to do an EIA for the runway, which was true. As you can see, we got an approved set of drawings, carry on. So at that point, there was a bit of an uproar. People said, well, how can there be no EIA, and so on. At which point, a representative of the Department of Environment stood up and said, well, no, there was a Class 2 EIA. And we did that, and that's done in-house, et cetera, et cetera. So we all sort of looked at each other. Well, have you seen it? Have you seen? No one's seen it. Okay. So then, after that, and remember, this was on the 9th of March, as per the newspaper article here of today. It was a Saturday, and it was at the Oshkeimer Community Center. Now, on the 14th of March, so 5 days after that public meeting, the science officer of ICS wrote to his management, his CEO, and said, "Dear all, As per request recording on scoping forms, we have received concerns from both planning and environment and other stakeholders highlighting that ICS must evaluate the impacts of the airstrip extension. Now bear in mind, the airstrip was built by then. As was stated during the public meeting by the representatives from the Environ EIA department, a Class 2 EIA was conducted internally for the airstrip and it was approved. That is this Class 2 that, as I mentioned, we had never seen before. As such, ICS will need to have access to this document so that we can ensure that the proper guidelines and recommendations outlined in Class 2 have been followed and address the concerns of the stakeholders. Keyword here being followed, had been followed because it was done. Okay, so anyway, then the management of ICS then wrote to environment. Said the attached mail is self-explanatory. We'll be grateful if the EIU Class 2 assessment for the airstrip extension and Assomption would be sent to us. So that was the CEO requesting this from environment then, because 5 days later they still hadn't seen it, although it had been said 5 days ago that it existed. So,
Wonderful.
no, madam, sorry, I really don't mean to be theatrical. I'm just really stating the facts.
Nothing surprises me, Mr. Savvy. Carry on.
Okay, madam. Okay. And then the person from environment. I'm trying to avoid mentioning names.
We know who you're talking about.
Okay.
So.
Okay. That then the point is made. Then I suppose, as my good friend Frank Elizabeth would say, the point is made. Okay. I refer to your email below. This is from environment now to ICS. I refer to your email below. Please note that a planning application reference DC 1500 was received from the planning authority. This was for the widening and lengthening of the airstrip on Assomption. This application was IDC and the application was submitted on October 2023. Correct so far. There was no mention that the proposed project was to be linked with the proposed tourism development as was stated in the public meeting. So if I can just stop here for a minute. This is where I start to become a bit perplexed because I'm thinking to myself, well, whether the runway had something to do with the hotel or not, let's say IDC decided they wanted to make the runway longer, would the environmental impact not be relevant, regardless of whether it was tied into a future development or not? So anyway, at this point, we're getting a bit perplexed as we read through this. At the time, obviously, when we got this email. A Class 2 EIA was conducted and environmental authorization with conditions was submitted to the planning authority. Note that Class 2 EIAs are carried out by our staff. Attached is a copy with a final recommendation made by our officer. Now, you see, this is where we're completely confused because it says that an environmental authorization with conditions was submitted to planning. But we never got that document, as you've clearly seen on the list of documents we received back. And I've actually taken a screenshot with a copy of the nation so you can see the date. Okay. I was not able to provide the environment goes on. I was not able to provide the environmental authorization in view that ICS is a third party. You will have to liaise with IDC and the planning authority for a copy of the environmental authorization. We have not been able to monitor this development and cannot confirm whether the extension has been completed. Therefore, we cannot confirm whether the conditions stipulated in the EIA, I suppose I meant EIA, have been adhered to with regards sign off.
And this is from?
Environment Miss Law.
From Miss Law.
Yes.
When you received your planning approval, were there any conditions attached to the planning approval?
Like I said, from PUC and SCAA.
That's it.
That's it, madam.
That's it.
And you will see from my documents here.
No, I just want to reconfirm that.
Yes, reconfirm, madam, 100%. Okay. Okay. So then attached to this email was this Class 2 EIA. Now, remember, it was mentioned that it was done on the 9th of March in the public meeting, and we only got a copy of it. Well, at that point, even I hadn't a copy of it. ICS was given a copy of it on the 14th, 5 days after the fact, after they sent an email because they still didn't receive it after the public meeting. So the document, which eventually I got a hold of as well because it was then circulated to all, is 1.5 pages, okay? So in this, and this is supposed to be the Class 2 EIA. So even that is not actually a form of conditions. This is a Class 2 EIA, which, you know, the conditions would flow from. So we still like this is why I tell you this is the first time I see this document. Okay, so long story short, in view of the complex biodiversity and sensitive nature of the species, the biodiversity conservation section has given due attention and consideration while appraising the proposed development. So they go on about how it's very sensitive, and they make the following recommendations in the Class 2 EIA. A designated needs, I'm reading verbatim here, a designated needs to be allocated for the storage stroke stockpiling of any construction materials. Details of methodology stroke scope and proposed timeline of the project to be made available. Details of mitigation measures in relation to the earthworks.
Mr. Savi, if I can interrupt, what date is the document?
This is actually very important. The date of the document is the 15th of November. And this becomes pertinent in a minute if you'll bear with me. So, details of mitigation measures in relation to earthworks to be conducted, especially in terms of sediments being washed to sea, installing sedimentation filtration systems or settling ponds to capture and filter sediment-laden water before it's discharged into marine environments. List of any vegetation to be removed needs to be provided, if any. Map out sensitive areas such as nesting sites for seabirds and sea turtles, fragile ecosystems, and unique flora. Designate buffer zones and no construction areas around these sites. Translocation of any native plants prior to any construction activities. Implementing comprehensive waste management practices to prevent littering, proper disposal of construction debris, and avoid any pollutants from entering the surrounding environment. Signed off and dated 15th of November 2023. Now, as I said, we had never seen this until the 15th of
Thank you.
Of March. Now, what's important though, and this jumped out at me when I read this document, is that the date of this Class 2 EIA is the exact same date that the planning drawings were approved and submitted back to us. So, I don't understand how the EIA Class 2 can be written the same day that the drawings were stamped approved. You understand? Because
yes, unless they send them and then the planning authority approves them, having received the communication from environment
well,
on the same day.
Well, the thing is, madam, that planning meets, the planning board is a body that actually approves applications, ultimately. They receive it, they send to referral bodies will come back to comments.
Yes,
then
I know, but in our work that we have done, we've seen many documents, for example, for stop notices or variation of stop notices, where it's done simultaneously. It goes from one to the other and it's done simultaneously.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because my confusion was because planning board only meets every Friday. And if you look up the date of the 15th of November 2023, it was a Wednesday.
We find that a lot of things in this exercise, they have not met the normal timelines, that either things were expedited for some reason or not, but they did not meet the normal timelines. That's been one of our findings.
Okay.
Sorry, Utanma. Thank you. Can we have a look at this document, please?
Okay. This one?
This one?
The thing, Mr. Savi, is that your notice for handing over was on the 8th of July
For handing over.
of the resurfacing and extension. IDC's stated, IDC's date is 8th of July, where they send a notice
To.
Planning for completion.
to planning for completion, yes.
Ah, okay. Well, that's the notice of completion.
Yeah.
But I mean, the notice of completion comes once all the work is done. Like I said,
Yeah, so the work had been done.
the work had been done. Like I said, practical completion was achieved in end of Feb.
That's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
by July, anyway, Mr. Savi was giving them notice that he was handing over because they were the contractors. So he was happy that the work had been done.
Sorry,
So-
I don't follow you, madam. So, Mr. Savi, you mean Mr. Glennie Savi?
Mr. Glennie Savi, not you.
Yes. Sorry.
Mr. Glennie Savvy was doing the formal handing over.
On the in 2024, July 2024, he
Okay,
was
July.
formally handing over the runway
Yes,
as IDC Construction to IDC landlord.
exactly.
Okay, right, okay.
In fact, in there is Urbicon. That's why I was asking you before, who contacted you? Was it IDCC or was it Urbicon or was it IDC?
No, but they can't. No, Urbicon doesn't own the runway, madam. So they can't be handing over the runway to Urbicon.
Well, I didn't make it up. It's in there.
Would you mind? May I take a look at that? Maybe I can.
It's in terms of their contract for the 10 million that was paid for it. There was an issue at one stage where there was confusion between IDCC and Urbicon, and at one stage in our documents we do have correspondence where IDCC says, please use Urbicon, not IDC. Use IDCC, not Urbicon. So it's possible that there's also a terminology error.
Difficulty.
Oh, okay, all right, okay, understood. Yeah,
In that.
that's why I said it's the organization. So anyway, but yes, okay, I take your point. In accordance with clause 16. Okay, this has to do with the lighting. Okay, yes. Would you like me to go into this? Okay, like I said, the runway was practically complete. That means that the concrete was casted, the runway was there, planes could land on it. But one of the requirements for this runway was to have landing lights, to upgrade it, to have landing lights and so on. And there was a specialist that was to come and do that. And that specialist came later in the game because, well, it could be done later and they needed more time for whatever reason. And that came after the fact. So when I'm telling you that it was the work was practically complete, I mean the concrete was cast, there was a runway, okay? So this is referring to the lights.
Subsequent work.
Well, it was part of the original contract, but it came later because they had some complication with the lights, but this is, I can't tell you much about
That's
that.
fine.
So
In terms of your agreement with the organization who contacted you for the widening and the lengthening, did they pay you directly?
yes.
How much did they pay you?
At the madam, I don't remember exactly, but I'm happy to give you a copy of the contract. There is a
No,
contract.
we need all of that.
I will submit it to you,
Okay.
madam. I didn't know you were
Thank
going
you.
to see that. I will submit it to you.
I know it's very important.
Yes, of course.
It's very
I will
important.
If you allow, I'll take a note
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I will give it to you.
So we need a copy of the contract who you entered into.
Yeah.
You also said you were contacted directly. Do you know whether there was any competitive tender or request for quotation for this process?
Well, again, from talking with the people in the organization, I know that they were talking to several people. But like I said, in Seychelles, the availability for that sort of service is very.
I know that, but I'm just asking you, are you aware?
Yes, I was told.
Was there a competitive tender?
Well, I don't know if they did a full tender, but they requested quotes from different people. Like for example, we didn't fill a full tender for the assignment for the investigator for the ground investigation. We filled a, how do you call it? We filled a request for quote. We need a ground investigation. Tell us what you need to do to get us the facts we need.
And you got it based on your quotes?
Yes. Well, I assume so. Yes.
You then obviously became involved with the hotel development.
Yes.
How were you contacted for
Okay,
that?
madam, at this point, if you'll allow me, I would really like to address a certain point because, I think we all are reasonably intelligent people in the room and it's since day one of the commission. I mean, I watched the first couple of, for obvious reasons, I'd be interested. And I feel and I see and that I think there is an undercurrent of an implication of nepotism. Okay, so I would rather we talk about the elephant in the room, and I'm very confident to talk about it because
We are talking about it.
yes, no, but let's be blatant. Okay. Now, yes, Glennie Savvy is my father, as one of the first things you stated when we started. And in fact, my middle name is Glennie. Everyone, I think most people in the Republic of Seychelles know that, okay? Now, I want to make one thing clear, that Atom Engineering was founded in 2000, it was incorporated, it first started, it was registered in 2010. It started practicing in 2011, okay? Atom Engineering has never worked for IDC at any point in time while Mr. Glennie Savvy was the CEO. If there was any nepotism where Mr. Glennie Savvy was doing me favors because I'm his son, I'm related to him and so on, well then I would have to ask, why did we not do when I say we, I mean my organization, which I run, and I'm majority shareholder, why did we therefore not get given the Independence House Annex? Why were we not given the Platte Island project? Why were we not given the condominium project? Why were we not given the SRC projects? IDC, GICC, which is their construction arm on Mahe, have done several landmark.
It's a fair point, and that's why I wanted you to have your right of reply.
Yes, madam.
But what I must say to you is that when we did our first interview with representatives of OBIL, they said they were directed to you by Mr. Savvy. That's why I have to ask the question.
No, absolutely, madam, and I fully respect that. I am not aware.
So you don't know whether Mr. Savvy told them to contact you?
No, I am not aware of that. Like I said, I got a phone call one day. It was with regards to a geotechnical assignment. It was not to design the structure of any building or any hotel.
Subsequent to that.
Yeah, if you will, let me carry on. I will explain to you exactly how we ended up on this hotel. So we've established that Atom Engineering and IDC, it's not in our history that there's been any nepotism or giving of projects or anything else, okay? And please, I would implore you, madam, please go check.
It's going on the record.
Fine. No, but go check who did those projects, okay? And please, because I really want to clear the air with this, okay? Because, and I'll tell you why after. Now, with regards to the Assomption job, we got a call because there was this geotechnical assignment that had to be done. We got and there's not many people that do geotechnical works. Okay, Atom Engineering does geotechnical works here for most of the projects which are so involved. For example, we do a lot of consulting for VJ and UCPS as well, because they are geotechnical contractors, piling works and so on. Okay, most of the piling works that you see, for example, the buildings next to the courthouse there, we designed it. The one behind the Victoria North petrol station, we did the piles. We do a lot of geotechnical works. Okay, so it was not abnormal for someone to approach us for geotechnical works. And perhaps, I mean, again, I cannot say for a fact, but perhaps it would be normal for someone to say, well, if you're looking for geotechnical works, go talk to these guys.
That's fine, Mr. Savvy. That is not the question. Yes. The question for us is we're just putting it to you, what has been told to us. Right. And you have the right to refute that, and this is why you are here.
Yes,
okay, so you refuted the fact that you got this through nepotism. You got this on your own merit, and I don't doubt it. Okay. Having said that, we have persons who have given testimony who said that they were referred to you by Mr. Savvy. That's why I put the question to you. Okay. You've answered the question, all right?
Okay, madam.
When we come to the Hotel Civil Works project, you were also the engineer appointed. Atom Engineering was also the engineer appointed.
Yes, if I can explain to you how that happened. So after we finished the the geotechnical assignment, and we handed over our report, the report basically painted a bit of it painted a picture that showed that it would be a challenge found on this ground. When I say found, to create a foundation on this ground. So the big bosses, to use a colloquial term, flew down. They flew down to the island. I was asked to attend as well. I was there. The developer at the time
who asked you to be present?
The developer, I mean, their representative. There was a fellow there called Basil, lovely gentleman. He was there. He was staying on the island throughout the whole. He was there even when we were doing the assignment and so on. And we got to know each other. And he also being there when we were doing the assignment, he realized the complications. When the report went out to the bosses came down to see for themselves. Long story short, the big boss himself, the gentleman in the burgundy tie, as you referred to him on your previous thing,
Mr. Al-Kayat,
he was there, and he started talking to me. And it was a very interesting conversation, because I came to understand that I had never really had a conversation with him before. I had heard the name, but I had never met the man. It was the first time I met the man, and he was very down to earth. He came straight up to me, and he said, Michel, so, and he started asking me questions, and I started to understand that this man actually understood construction, he understood soil, he understood rocks, he understood foundations. And by the time he finished asking me questions and I answered him, he seemed satisfied with the answer, and he turned around and he said to Basil and his Basil was his man who was staying on the island at the time, one of his sort of lieutenants, if you can use that term. He said that, look, Atom needs to give us a proposal to do this. I think that should be the case. Mm-hmm. And from what I recall, Basil also said to me, he said, look, you probably should take this because you've understood what's going on in the ground. If we go and we get someone from abroad who doesn't understand this, there would be disconnects. Now, at the time, I was actually reluctant to take on the job, and I'll tell you why. They are very demanding people to work for, extremely so. An example is that when we were doing the assignment on the island, one night, it was a Thursday night, I'll never forget, it was 9 o'clock on Thursday on Assomption Island. I get a call from one of their big bosses. And he says to me, I need photos of the island and what you guys are doing there, send me photos. I said, okay, I'll take some photos on my cell phone tomorrow and I'll send it to you. And he said, no, I need professional photos, a professional photographer. I said, well, I'm 1,000 kilometers away from my, where am I going to get a photographer now at 9 o'clock at night? And he said to me, basically that's your problem. And I'm paraphrasing now. He says, I'll expect the photos tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. So here I am, incredulous, and very much, offended, if you can say that, perhaps. And so and there was a lot of these sorts of pressures, which was a bit affronting, you can say. And so I was reluctant to now, if this was a 3-week assignment, was like this, I mean, what was a 1-year assignment going to be like? But eventually, talking to the guys that were based here, the developers team that were based here, and they said, look, don't worry, we'll be there, we support you, we'll work together, we'll make it through, whatever it is. And finally I said, okay, you know what? Let's take the challenge on, okay? Because that's the kind of person I am. I like taking on challenges, and so let's take on the challenge. Okay. It was not easy, but we pulled through.
We have had several different testimony from different people who say that they were very slow in payment. Would that have been your experience as well?
Yes, they are. In my experience personally, I don't know about payments to others. They are slow. I can tell you, madam, for the Runway, we were paid a year after it was completed. Generally they are slow, but they are. My experience, I talk for myself, not for others, they are not dishonest in terms of not paying, but it takes them a while to pay because their machinations are the organization is so big and there's so many signatures, and then one guy challenges it and it comes back to you and so on and so forth. So it's a whole process, yes, and they are slow. It can take months to get paid, yes, that is true.
Can I also ask you, so you were involved in the hotel development, which is under stop notice at the moment, as you know.
Well, yes.
So in regards to that hotel development, OBIL has asserted, that's Ocean Breeze International Limited.
Correct.
They've asserted that approximately 50% of the hotel civil works have been completed. IDC staff, mostly Christian, has told us that there's an estimation of 20% completion, according to him. What is Atoms Engineering's independent assessment of how much of it has been completed?
Closer to 20%.
You say 20%? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
In September 2025, you accompanied Miss Lisette Ree,
Lisette
R-E-E,
Lisette Ree.
yourself, Atom Engineering, staff from the Planning Authority to have a look at the site in Assomption.
Who's Lisette Ree? Lisette Marie?
Could be.
Okay, Lisette Marie works in our office. She's our head of admin,
Okay.
yes. Okay.
So you accompanied her?
Well, assuming you're talking about Marie
Yes.
and not Ree, yes,
Yeah.
that would be her. Yeah.
What was the purpose of the inspection and what findings did you make?
When was this?
I think it's September 25 for my records here.
Well, we do the monitoring of the structural works as it's executed on the island, and we've been doing so since it started. Because as you know, in the Republic of Seychelles, when you submit a structural design to planning, you undertake through the engineering certificate that you will monitor and supervise the execution of the works and make sure it's sound and so on and so forth. So I would go up to the island quite regularly, and in fact, we have staff posted on the island during that
I just
period.
wondered because there is a minute by IDC that in August 2025 you had demobilized for non-payment of fees.
Yeah, well,
That's
we
why I'm
hadn't
asking.
demobilized. I told my staff to put the pens down, yes. Because what happened was, because as you say, and as I confirmed with you as well, they have a long lead payment period time. And generally it's a month, 2 months, and so on. But the problem with that, with the monitoring, okay, was that we have salaries of 2 people to pay on that island. And it doesn't come cheap to ask people to live on a desert island for a year. And so what happened was, we, for 1 month, it takes, usually takes a month for them to pay. And then 2 months, they hadn't paid, which was starting to get abnormal. And then 3 months, and there was no payment still. So then I called them up. I said, guys, it's a bit much now. Even if you cover a portion, and the thing was, it wasn't because they hadn't paid just 1 month. It had been an accumulation of months, and we were paying this out of our. We were basically financing the project in a sense. So insofar as the monitoring of the execution of structural works was going. So then I told them, I said, listen guys, I think that you need to take this more seriously. So I've asked my team to stop signing any document. And we got paid within a few weeks.
You've been fully paid at this stage?
Yes, at this stage, everything that we've invoiced for the supervision, we've been paid for the supervision, yes.
Just in terms of ethics, did you ever declare to Obil that you were your father's son?
Not officially, but they knew.
You didn't make what we call a disclosure to them?
In writing, no, I did not.
Okay.
But they were fully aware. I mean, it was a known fact.
Okay.
But to put it officially, no.
And you don't know whether, just as well as the runway, whether the hotel development itself for the contractor and the subcontracts, were they tendered in any way?
In what sense? You mean for the engineering design? No, madam, I'm not aware.
You were contacted directly by your father for the engineering designs for the hotel?
Me contacted by my father? No, madam. I was not contacted by my father for works that is contracted by IDCC. IDCC is a Qatari company, madam.
I thought that was only for the runway. I'm asking you for the hotel.
Yes, no, I'm telling you, no. I was not contacted by Mr. Glenny Savi, my father, at all for any works. And in fact, the hotel structural works was a formal tender, because I know that because we had negotiations. Obviously, they asked us they sent us a full tender pack. Okay, and I can share this with you. Okay, they gave us a full tender pack to fill, just like a normal tender pack, to fill, to quote for the structures. We gave them a fee to do the structural design, okay? They came back to us, and their point of negotiation was that they had asked a local Qatari company called DSG, I believe, to also price it. And they found that our price should be significantly lower than DSG because overheads and so on. So I know for a fact that they had gotten other people to quote internationally for the hotel design.
Okay.
But like I said before, the people that were here, their people that were here had their reasons why they wanted us to do it, because of the knowledge of the ground and so on.
We don't have them. Well, they're international. Which one are you looking for?
They have no license.
UCC.
That's what I'm asking. So, just bear with us. We're just checking. So
No problem, madam, no problem.
was the relationship between Urbicon and IDCC ever explained to you?
In what?
You were working on the island for quite a while. You saw the UCC office.
Yes.
And you also understood IDCC were working with them.
IDCC or IDC?
IDCC.
IDCC were basically what you would... Okay, IDCC was more like a project manager stroke design manager, if you will, okay? So what they would do, you see, in the Gulf, the way that they structure their construction projects and development projects is quite different how we do here, and we tend to use the English system. But let me try and explain. So IDCC is like a head consultant. So what they do is they appoint the architects, the MEP, the structural engineer, whoever needs to be appointed as sort of designer consultants. They appoint them. They oversee them, and they certainly oversee the sort of master program of the project.
We get all that. We have a little scenario. What I'm trying to understand from you is IDCC was a foreign company.
IDCC, yes, it's Qatari, yes.
And it was employing you to do work for them in Seychelles.
Correct.
Okay, that's it. That's all I wanted to get from you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I have to ask you a direct question. Have you in any way, you, Michel Savi, personally or Atom Engineering, received any gifts, any payment, any commission, any benefits in any kind, any inducement beyond your normal contract fees from either OBIL, IDCC, UCC, the Assets Group, or anybody else?
No, madam.
Thank you. If you want to make any personal financial disclosure, you are very welcome to do so.
There's
Okay.
no financial disclosure?
Disclosure.
In what sense?
Just in terms of your own assets and interests to show that there has not been any improper payments made to you. You're very welcome to do so.
Okay. I mean, I work for Atom Engineering. I'm a shareholder. I get my dividends. All Atom Engineering's payments come through the banks in Seychelles, so that's subject to a
Thank you.
TIN and FIU. Anything I own in terms of real estate is in the registrar's office. I mean,
Okay.
I don't hold any holdings abroad, personally, nor does Atom Engineering. And our audited reports are there. We get audited by a serious auditor, Baker Tilly. We outsource our bookkeeping as well to a properly established accountancy firm, BMK. So, no, madam, we have no, madam, Atom Engineering has no reason to take gifts on the side. First of all, because I'm the majority shareholder, so if I steal from Atom, I steal from myself.
Thank
You know, if I can just say, Atom Engineering has today is one of the companies that maybe most people have not even heard of it, because we don't deal with the sort of people doing their ground plus one buildings and all that. We tend to deal with the bigger. I mean, before Assomption, our big project was Cheval Blanc. We were doing that resort, and before that, there was. It doesn't come to mind now, but there were several other large. I mean, we're doing Le Chantier Mall now. That was a public tender. Everyone can go check.
No, I thank you for your
Yeah.
response, but I had to put a question to you. Given the
Fine,
terms
madam.
of reference that we are operating under,
Yeah,
we have to
yeah.
ask about gifts.
Yeah.
And given your relationship with your father, I had especially to ask you the question.
Okay, madam.
So
No problem.
please bear with me if I ask you these questions.
No problem, madam.
It's
no
not a
problem.
personal attack, but
Yes,
I want you
yes,
to
yes.
understand that. You explained that for the runway, you had no prior knowledge until you had actually completed the runway, that there had been environmental conditions put to the EIA Class 2.
Sorry, I did not know about an EIA Class 2 at all, let alone conditions. Anyway,
Okay.
carry on, yes.
With the hotel development, were you ever made aware of the EISA?
Yes, of course. Like I said, I was even there at the public meeting at Wash Caïman. Yes, I was fully aware. And in fact, if I can say, I mean, Mr. Weber, Norman Weber and Greg Burke, I mean, we had a lot of exchanges, because nothing is standalone in these projects. Engineering ties to the environment, anyway, let's carry on.
Did you know about the restrictions with the sand dunes?
With the sand dunes, there was a limit that was, this is with the hotel project now, huh?
You didn't know when you were doing the airstrip, you weren't allowed to use sand dunes.
No, madam. I assure you, and in fact, okay, let's leave the hotel side for a minute. The sand dunes for the runway, okay, when it was being decided, because obviously, you see, runways, according to standard, to code, they can only have a certain gradient in terms of their slope, okay, both crossfall and longitudinal slope. Now, when we surveyed the ground there, what we found was that we would either have to cut the ground or fill the ground to get the correct vertical alignments. Now, if you cut the ground, you'd be trying to cut into limestone, which is not easy to do. So the easiest thing to do would be then to fill.
it.
Now, the question was, okay, well, what do we fill with? So that question obviously was with IDC, because IDC owns the island, if you will. They are leasing it, and they run it, and they've been running it for a long time. And two points came up. One was the fact that when the runway was initially built in the 80s, so I was probably not even born then, because I was born in 85. So when the runway was built in the 80s, the dunes sand had been used to create a flat surface on top of the coral to be able to cast concrete on top. So we said, okay, well, the dune, just like they did in the 80s. So that's one. And the second thing was, there was talk, I remember very well, there was talk about not bringing in fill from elsewhere. Okay, and I remember very well, IDC said, no, because you risk bringing in pests, and apparently there are other islands where they brought in, for example, seeds or whatever it was, and it brought in white flies or whatnot. And they said, so we're not going to risk bringing in foreign fill material.
So you use sand there locally?
Yes.
Were you told about the percentage of the dune that you could remove?
Not for the runway. For the runway, like I said, there was no comment about how much sand you would use and so on.
So obviously you used it to fill the runway.
Backfill. Yeah. Well, most of the areas you were talking about 0.5 meter of fill for most of the areas. Because bear in mind, madam, if I can just give you an idea of the scale, the existing runway at the time was 1,250 meters long. So the target of the exercise was to make the runway become 2,000 meters long. So you were essentially extending it by 800 meters. So you're talking about the volume of sand to allow you to create 800 meters being taken in 2023, compared to the volume of sand that was taken in the 80s to do 1,200 meters. So it was significantly less than was used at the time. But yes, it was used.
Okay. So you did a few tests on the island, and you eventually saw the scale of the project that was going to be built on the island.
Yes.
The first was a chat of 42 chalets, backhouses, restaurants, spas, also the very large solar system that has to go there, also the desal plant that's supposed to go there. Having done your tests and knowing also that Assomption lies in a cyclonic belt and the buildings have to be reinforced and it has to be made of concrete, did you express any concerns about the weight of that structure on the cast?
No, madam, if I can, again, I know where it's coming from. I saw that interview. Madam, if I can just say, there are a lot of, I have a lot of respect for my fellow professionals. But one of the things that I've noticed in this process is that you have a lot of people who are experts in their domain, but unfortunately make statements about things which are not necessarily in their domain. And
that's why I'm asking you, it's
exactly.
your domain.
So no, but the problem is it creates a false perception. I mean, we're making this public for the people to understand, and doing this does not help people understand. So if I may, this thing about the rock cracking open under the weight of concrete is, I'm sorry, but it's nonsense, okay? Because when you design a foundation, right, you design a foundation to exert a bearing pressure onto the ground on which it sits. Now, bearing pressure causes the ground to deform. If you think of ground, it's like a mattress. You push down on it, it sinks in, pushes the little side up. That's how it works. Okay, this is soil, this is a rock, not quite the same, but as such. So there is a limit to how much pressure you can exert on a rock or a soil before it fails, and it generally fails in shear, which means it basically slips. Okay? So now, this is why we did a geotechnical investigation. Once the geologist comes in and says, well, okay, well, this is, Uritic limestone, it's formed in this way, then they give us this as input as engineers, and as engineers, we then go to our references and we know, okay, well, this kind of limestone, you can put a bearing pressure of 200 kilopascals, for example, okay? And therefore, we then design a foundation which would take the weight of the building, and by controlling the area of contact on the ground, we then limit it to that parameter which we establish from input from the geologists. So no, we're not going to break the rock, because that's the point of geotechnical design, to ensure that we create an interface structure, which is called a foundation, which can...
But in terms of what we have seen, and in terms of all the drawings that we have looked at, it seems that the developers would visit the site and then would increase the size of the building or the size of the span of the ceiling, and then drawings would have to be resubmitted. We have several instances of that. that buildings were increased in size or they were changed?
Yeah. So any buildings that increase in size on which there's a structural impact, we sign it off first. And I can tell you, I've had a couple of run-ins with some of the staff and it's not because because we're trying to be the good guys here, it's because we're responsible. If the building collapses tomorrow, Atom Engineering, me specifically, as a person who signs the license, will have to go answer why this building came down. So it doesn't matter if you own the building, I'm responsible for it. So I've had a couple of run-ins with that, but what I can tell you, madam, is that any changes that we've seen were honestly not substantial in terms of being a big increase in surface area. For example, one that comes to mind is they wanted a window because they've got these full height glass window things, very modern architecture, not to everyone's taste, but they wanted it to be a bit wider. So the column had to move, things like that. So obviously we have to check that, resubmit it, and so on and so forth. There are areas where they added an outdoor sauna. So, but an outdoor sauna is, 3 meters by 3 meters. It's not changing the vernacular of the project. That is what I recall, unless of course there's one that you can correct.
No. We don't want to bore anybody with this. We have hundreds of drawings, and we appreciate our limitations. We are coming to the end of our investigation, and in fact our questions for you this morning, and we're very grateful if you could send us. What we're very interested in is the contract that you had. We want to identify who you had the contract with.
Well, there were several contracts, madam.
I'm talking about the Runway first of all.
Contract for Runway.
And then the contract for your work for the hotel development.
Yeah, I can tell you they were both with. Yeah, okay, contract.
I think they paid you separately for the ground investigation, did they not?
Yes, it was a separate contract,
yeah,
yes.
I'll need that as well.
Okay. Contract for hotel, contract for ground investigation.
And just confirmation, it was IDCC who contacted you for these works?
Yes, as far as I recall, yes. Yeah.
It's just to bolster your evidence. If you could send us this, it will be perfect.
Absolutely.
So by the end of the week, if possible, or next week?
No, by the end of the week. It's there. I just have to go to the archive. It's all digitized, so it's
Thank
fine.
you. You have documentation here to give us?
This is a trail of documents for.
So we're going to put everything that comes in this, and we are going to mark it as M20.
Okay.
So everything that you send to us, just prefix it by M20, and we'll know it goes in this folder. Okay, thank you. I always end by asking you if you yourself want to say anything. We have missed out on, or we may have given the wrong impression, or we haven't asked you and you think it's important. Please feel free to do that.
Well, madam, thank you for the opportunity. And yes, I think I haven't watched all the interventions, but I did watch some, especially at the beginning, in your first set before you broke for February or
February.
Before, yeah. So I was watching the ones in January especially. And madam, it's very important. It's extremely important what you're doing, and I respect that fully. Okay. I suppose as an engineer, having all the facts and the data is important to me in what I do. So I respect what you're trying to achieve as well. However, unfortunately, it seems to me that there are certain elements whereby misinformation is inserted in, and I'm not saying it's necessarily on purpose. I think some people just get excited sometimes, As I mean, you're a legal person, to argue dispassionately. Some people don't quite do that. And there were 2 points that I wanted to point this out on. Okay. The first one I think we've touched on, which had to do where there was this issue about people making statements about rocks cracking open islands and all sorts of fantastical things. Like I said, I respect my fellow professionals. Okay, I work with teams of professionals day in, day out. like I just said, geophysicists, geologists, marine biologists, like Greg, for example, we work together, he's a marine biologist, okay? I work with electrical engineers, I work with all sorts of people, and I respect what they do, but we all have our fields, and it doesn't help anyone when statements are made by people who are not qualified to make these statements, because it potentially also dilutes your job, madam, okay, your assignment. And I'm not telling you how to do your job, but it's important.
No, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
And in fact, we wanted to point out that people might say what they say, but at the end of the day, we write our report, and we rely on reliable information.
Correct, correct. Now, the other thing that obviously I wanted to bring out was the story of nepotism. I mean, we've spoken about this because it was clear that there was a line or an insinuation or some kind of, there was a, it was how can I say it? It was implied, perhaps indirectly, that there was nepotism because Glenn Saab is my father and so on and so forth. But I just wanted to, and I think I've explained that to you, I've asked you, then why not the others? Because you see, madam, Atom Engineering was started in 2011. I started that company myself and my partner at the time. He was much older than me. And we started in my attic at home with 2 laptops and a little printer. And we worked very hard to build this thing into what it is today. Sleepless nights, personal costs, social costs. But we built something because we believed that the Republic of Seychelles needed a large engineering company. Because prior to Atom Engineering, most of the big projects in Seychelles were done by foreign bodies. So for example, if you look at the infrastructure works that's being done, so the Republic of Seychelles goes to, Badea or these foreign financing companies or organizations, takes a loan, pays it to a foreign consultant, he banks it in his country, lines his financial system, and we pay the capital and the interest back for his country to get richer. So I said, no. At some point, we can do this. So we did it. And so today, when, for example, the Republic of Seychelles takes a loan to build roads, bridges, whatever it is, Atom Engineering can bid on it, tender on it. If we win it, all the better, because then we bank it at MCB Seychelles. MCB creates loans, gives people loans to build their homes. And this is my view as a Seychellois born and bred. Okay? I don't hold any other passports. I hold a Seychellois passport. And I grew up here. I've only lived away from my country when I was studying. And I will certainly help it as much as I can, keep our economy pumping, and certainly not let anyone come and say, oh, we're going to do this or that, or, never mind this. No, this I want to be clear on. At no point was Atom Engineering born of nepotism. It was born out of hard work, and it is a company that existed for a reason. It's not just something to create cash. There was a purpose for it.
Thank you.
Okay? Lastly, madam, and this perhaps is a bit more comical. At the very outset, one of the questions that you kept asking was, do you believe that this is sustainable development? Or I'm paraphrasing now, is this sustainable development? And all these experts, and I was flabbergasted because all these experts in environmental sciences were coming up and saying, oh, well, to be sustainable, it has to be this. I think Dr. Mortimer, a lady who I haven't seen since I was a child, actually, I knew her quite well at the time, she said something interesting. She said, I think she's the one that came as close to the definition, where she said, sustainable doesn't mean small, okay? She said something of the sort. But here's where I was flabbergasted. When I was at university, second year, there was a unit. I studied in West Australia. There was a unit called Sustainable Development, 202 or something like that. And on the first lecture, the lecturer got up in front of the, on his pulpit thing there, and he said, welcome to Sustainable Development 202. The definition of sustainable development is the ability for today's generation to satisfy their needs without compromising the ability for tomorrow's generation to satisfy their needs. There you have it. And this is not a definition that he invented, because I actually went afterwards and I looked it up in your textbooks. All textbooks tell you the same thing. So this is a unified definition.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit flabbergasted how all these experts
I think the conversations we had really were on the everybody's different versions of what ecotourism meant. And perhaps you could tell me what your version of ecotourism is.
Well, madam, for me, ecotourism is a form of tourism which is designed to firstly impart the importance of ecology to the guest who participates in this tourism, and secondly, given that it is supposed to be ecological, it's supposed to be sustainable. And sustainable development is defined, as I said. Now, if we've defined it, we have a definition for it, we can therefore compare what we have, well, what we're trying to develop on this island, and see if it fits the definition. So it's Boolean. Does it in fact allow the generation of today to satisfy their needs without compromising the ability for tomorrow's generation to satisfy their needs? Yes or no? That's the question. And if we can say yes to this, then it is. If we cannot say yes to this, we say no, it will compromise tomorrow's generation to be able to satisfy their needs insofar as assumption goes, then it is not sustainable. And then you go back to the drawing board and you figure out how to make it sustainable, okay? But
no, I think that's helpful for the work of the Commission. I thank you for it.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very happy that I was able to help, and I'm very happy that you allowed me to.
You were very helpful. I will just await the last document so we can finish up with.
Yes, I've noted it in here, so I will go back and.
Yes, you have our address now. We're in touch. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Savi. You may leave court. Thank you.
Registrar.
I'm just telling quickly that we will be online this afternoon from 1:30 in an hour. It's online because we're talking to over.
Okay. Just for our listeners on SBC, we are taking the testimony online of a witness who's not in the country. His name is Mr. Omar Al-Salihi for the developers. So if you want to watch it, it's either on our Teams link, which is on our website, or I think that SBC will be transmitting it anyway. Thank you.
At 1:30.
We will start at 1:30.